Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Star Talk for the MSU Science Festival. My name is Dr. Shannon Schmoll, and I am the director of the Abrams Planetarium at Michigan State University. We miss having you all at our wonderful building, but we know it's for the right reasons that we can't have you there right now there. And once we can have you back, we'll be happy to have you back there. But in the meantime, we are going to share with you what we can see in the night sky this time of year using a software called Stellarium. Stellarium is a really wonderful free software. You can actually go and download it yourself from stellarium.org. It works for Windows, Macs, and Linux computers, and there's also a web version. So I'll show you some things that you can do with it today, as well as show you what is up in the sky. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can check it out. All right, so here we go. I have a set for tonight, April 13th at about 9:19 p.m. So this is set for about an hour after sunset. So this is when we would normally start a planetarium show, and we are facing north. And I like to face north because there's a pretty well-known asterism. An asterism is just any shape that we see within the stars. The constellation is an official asterism that the International Astronomical Union uses. So one of the most well-known is the Big Dipper. It looks like a big ladle or a square spoon in the sky. It's 7 stars, and it's very high in the sky this time of year, which makes it a really nice and convenient thing to try to find. So look at the screen, see if you can find that Big Dipper shape at all. I'll give you a second to try to do that. All right, did you find it? It's right here. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4 stars in the bowl, and 1, 2, 3 stars in the handle. So one of the cool things about Stellarium is I can click on a star, and it tells me all this information over here. Like this star is called Mizar. It has a lot of other names too, like Zeta Uma, which is Zeta Ursa Major. Also 79 Ursa Major, or HIP 6537-8A. That's a catalog that it's in. But what's really cool is if we look closer at this star, we see one star, but if I click my space bar, it centers us on it, and we can zoom in by scrolling on my mouse. And we see it's actually 2 stars, Alcor and Mizar. So Mizar is the brighter one we see, but there's also this dimmer one right next to it called Alcor. If you have really good eyes, you might be able to see both of those stars in the sky together. And that actually used to be a way that people would do eyesight tests a long time ago. So go outside and try to find that. Now, the Zeta Ursa Major, or UMA here, comes from the official constellation that the Big Dipper is in. So I'm going to go ahead and outline that constellation. So this is Ursa Major, or the Great Bear. So here's the nose of the bear, and here's the legs, and another leg, and the body, and the tail. This bear has a long tail. So if you ever meet a bear with a long tail, it's a space bear. But there is a story. This was a woman named Callisto, and the Greek god Zeus fell in love with her. He fell in love with everyone, and he wanted to protect her from Hera, his wife, who was very angry that he fell in love with her. So he turned her into a bear. And then she was out in the forest about to be shot by a bow and arrow by a hunter. So he grabbed her real quick by her short, stubby bear tail and threw her up into the sky. When he did that, her tail got stretched out. So there's our big bear there and our Big Dipper. Now, if we go to these outer 2 stars here of the Big Dipper, we have Dubhe and Merak. So if we follow a line through them and keep going, we find this star here. What star is that? It's a very important star. I'm going to imagine you're shouting out a name right now. All right. This is the star Polaris, or the North Star. It tells us where north is. We can have big red letters that help us in here, but in the real sky, we don't have those big red letters. So we find Polaris, the North Star, which is also a part here of our Little Dipper, which is also Ursa Minor, our little bear. So this is the little bear's tail and the body. So that hunter that was about to shoot Callisto was her son Arcus, and Zeus didn't want Callisto to be lonely in the sky, so he turned him into a bear and threw him up in the sky too. So Polaris is known as our pole star because if we watch it throughout the night, it doesn't move. It is the axis of rotation for the stars. And that's because the stars aren't moving. It is the Earth that's rotating. And we rotate on an axis that we call our North and South Pole. And our North Pole points right at the North Star. So it is also known as our pole star or Polaris. Now, if we go from the Big Dipper to the North Star and about the same distance again, we also find this W shape, and this is the constellation Cassiopeia. So in Greek mythology, she was a queen of Ethiopia who was very vain, and her ultimate punishment for being so vain was that she was placed in the sky. And as she goes around Polaris, she is upside down for half her path. So let's speed time up. Let's watch how Polaris is slow, or isn't slow, it just stays put. We'll speed time up a little bit more. As we do that, you might notice these really fast things moving across the sky. Those are all satellites, man-made satellites. You can see we actually have quite a few of them. We'll come back to those later. But here, what you can see is the North Star stays put. It's the axis of rotation as stars appear to take paths that are circular around it. And the ones that are close enough are going to have full paths that never set. So the sun's coming up now, but we still can have those constellation lines up. And we can see that Cassiopeia and Ursa Major never set. They have their entire path above the horizon. So Cassiopeia, as she goes around the North Star, she's upside down for half of her path. And that what's, I think, important to take away from this story, one, don't be vain, I guess, but more importantly, there's astronomy built into stories. I think we tend to think about the mythologies or the stories that we might tell with the stars as just stories, so to speak, but they're more than that. They're a way to tell stories that have morals and values attached to them that are important to different cultures, but they're also there to help us tell observations about science. There's observations about the sky and important things about the sky and science about the sky built into those stories. So when we tell the stories, listen for the science that's built into them as well. So what I want to do now is move away from the north, and we're going to move over toward the west. So if we go to the west, I want to go to the west first because the constellations in the west are the ones that are going to set first. So I'm going to move us back to where we were before, which is the 13th at about 9:14. So I just type that in and it takes us right back. This is where we were. You can see there's still a bit of sky glow from the sun, but we are about an hour after sunsets. We are in spring now. We are heading deeper into spring, but we still see a few of our winter constellations in the west, but they are setting quite early. So before we jump into those, I want to show you one other thing. We have a very lovely apparition of Venus right now in the sky. So Venus is going to be one of the brightest things in the sky. The only thing brighter than Venus is the sun and the moon. So if you go outside and you see something that's ridiculously bright in the western sky right now, it's probably Venus. And so this is Venus. It's going to appear very bright. We're going to come back to that constellation in a moment. But let's zoom in on Venus. If you have binoculars or a telescope, point it at Venus. And let's go ahead and zoom in. And this is what you might see. You might not see this quite level of detail, but you will see this crescent shape. So Venus goes through phases like the moon does. So we can have a crescent Venus or a gibbous Venus or a full Venus. The reason why is because Venus is closer to the sun than we are. So its orbit as it goes around the sun, there might be a point where a good chunk of the lit up side of Venus is actually facing towards the sun and away from us. So just a small fraction of that lit up side is facing us here. So that's what's going on with this crescent Venus. And what's interesting is that when Venus is closest to us, is when it's passing in between us, but most of that lit up side is facing the sun, so it's just a very tiny crescent. But because it's so close to us, it's actually at its brightest when it's shining the least amount of light our way. So that's just a funny quirk about Venus right there. But you can go outside and see Venus, and if you have a telescope or binoculars, go check that out. We do still have Venus in the night sky for a little while longer. So let's zoom out. I'm going to turn these off for now. One of the best known winter constellations that is up is the constellation Orion. Orion is known for his belt of 3 stars. So we see his 3 stars right here. And if you can find his belt, his 3 stars, that is very helpful because that helps you find several other constellations. So let's start though by looking a little closer at Orion. So there's his belt. He also has his 2 shoulder stars here. There's Beetlejuice, which has been in the news quite a bit lately. Beetlejuice has been dimming quite a bit. We know it's a variable star. There's actually oral records that date for about 10,000 years from Aboriginal tribes in Australia that talk about Beetlejuice's variability. So it's been known for a very long time that Beetlejuice is a variable star. But what was particularly exciting is that it went to its dimmest that we've seen it in recent history. And we weren't sure what was going on. It went from about the 10th brightest star to about the 21st brightest star. We now are fairly certain it was a big dust cloud. It's a red giant star and it's losing some of the outer atmosphere, so we think some of that might have blocked some of the star a little bit. But it seems to be coming back in brightness, so we should see a nice bright Beetlejuice again pretty soon. Its other shoulder star is Bellatrix, so if you're a Harry Potter fan, yes, Bellatrix, as in Bellatrix Lestrange. We also have Rigel, which is the bright blue star of Orion here. And so you can see this color difference between orange and blue very clearly in the sky. So I would encourage you to go outside and try to see that before we lose Orion until next fall. And then we can use Orion's belt, like I said, to find some other constellations. So Orion is a hunter, and his belt points downwards to one of his hunting dogs, including the star Sirius. Again, Harry Potter with the constellation Sirius Black. So this is a hunting dog. Actually looks like a hunting dog. Maybe a wiener dog, but it's a hunting dog. So that Sirius is right on its collar. And what's the logo for Sirius Radio? It's a dog with a star on its collar. So if you need a logo, look up. He also has, Canis Major is our big dog, so he also has a little dog. You can make the winter triangle with Beetlejuice, Sirius, and Procyon here. And Procyon is the brightest star in the little dog, so I'm going to connect all the stars in the little dog now. It's 2 stars. That's it, right there. So we call it the hot dog. So I hope you groaned at that one. We have more. We have more bad jokes. I'm trying to spare you. All right. So here we have Orion's hunting dogs. If we use his belt, we can also go this way and we find the star Aldabaron, which is part of this sort of Y-shaped constellation, which is part of Taurus, the bull. So these are the horns of the bull. And Aldabaran is often sometimes referred to as the angry eye of the bull, but the name Aldabaran comes from Arabic for the follower, as it appears to follow the Pleiades star cluster right over here. So let's zoom in on that a little bit more. The Pleiades is also called the Seven Sisters. It's also called Subaru in Japan, so that's the Japanese car company's logo. Again, logos from the sky. So here, I'm pretty sure Merope is also a Harry Potter character. I might be wrong on that one. But you need witch and wizard names or logos you can look up. But we have the Pleiades. This is a beautiful open cluster of stars that is visible naked eye in the sky. And so I would encourage you to go look out at that. It's on the back of the bull. The bull also shares a star here. The Elnath, which is the upper horn here, shares a star with the constellation Orion, which includes the bright star Capella. We look up here, we'll see some more information about Capella. It's also called the goat star or the mother goat star. Capella comes from capra, which means goat in Latin, because this is the mother goat, and this is also, these three stars are known as her kids. So that little triangle are the kids. Auriga is a chariot driver. So we think that these might have been two separate constellations at some point that kind of got melded together over time. And then finally, we can still see for a little while longer. Let's go back just looking west. Follow Rigel up to Beetlejuice and keep going. We find the Pollux and Castor, which are the heads of the twins of Gemini right here. All right. Moving to the south, we can see our spring constellations. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more because I want to see the Big Dipper again. The Big Dipper is very high in the spring, and it's very handy for finding things in the springtime. So just like we use Orion to find winter constellations, we use the Big Dipper to find our spring ones. So the pointer stars that we use to find our North Star, you can also use to point downwards. And you find this sickle shape or a backwards question mark with a triangle behind it. And this dot here is the star Regulus. And this, yes, Regulus Black, if you are a Harry Potter fan. But this marks Leo the lion. So this is the head of Leo. And then this is the tail right here. And one thing that is helpful to remember this name is Regulus has the same root as regal or regnal, and so it has the same root for king, so the Lion King, and you can kind of remember that. Another really nice, fairly bright spring constellation that is up right now is this one right here. This is the constellation Corvus, the crow. And in Greek mythology, he was sent in order to grab Crater the cup, which is very faint. You probably won't be able to see it very well in the Lansing area. But he went to grab this cup, and along the way, he found a fig that he wanted to eat. And that fig wasn't ripe yet, and so he waited around for it to ripen, and that made him late. And so he wanted a good excuse for why he was late. So he brought back this snake, Hydra. It's a water snake, and said it attacked him. And the god Apollo saw through the lie, and so threw them all up into the sky. But we do have some really lovely constellations in the south. Corvus is particularly nice to see in the Lansing area. It's a nice bright one this time of year. And then going a little bit more towards the east and seeing where that Big Dipper is, the handle here makes an arc. And you can arc to the star Arcturus, which is another bright red star. So you arc to Arcturus, and you find this shape here, which is Boötes, the herdsman. And so he's a bear herder, and so he takes care of the bears in the sky. He sort of follows them across the sky and takes care of them. So this is what you can see in the night sky this time of year. We have our winter constellations setting, and we have our spring ones rising. As we go later into the night, let's go speed time up a little bit. And let's go look at these satellites a little bit more. So you can see some of them sort of zooming past. Most satellites in our sky that orbit around the Earth are in a near Earth orbit. They take about 90 minutes to go around the Earth once. That includes the International Space Station. We just had a few good viewings of them last week. Heavens-above.org is a great website to check out if you would like to see any more. But if you ever see what looks like a bright star, or even a faint star moving really quickly amongst the stars, you're probably seeing a satellite. It's really fun to just kind of sit outside and look up and see if you can find one. I always say my superpower is finding satellites, because every time I look up, I always manage to see one. But once you start looking up and starting to see them, you'll probably start seeing them a little bit more. But I've taken us to the morning now. We're at about 5 a.m. right before the sun starts rising. You can see some of our summer constellations are starting to come up, like Scorpius the Scorpion with the bright reddish star Antares, and Sagittarius, which we also like to call the teapot. So I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Here is my handle. Here is my spout. But we'll also have the moon up in the morning right now. It is a beautiful third quarter moon on the 13th, on the 14th in the morning. So if you have a telescope, try to go out and see these beautiful craters that we have on the moon. When we have a quarter moon like this, you can get some really nice detail right at the terminator between dark and light. But we also have 3 planets that you can check out in the southeast right before the sun comes up. So that is worth getting up for in the morning, even when you might not have to right now. And if you do have to get up, this is a great thing to try to go see and keep the wonder of the universe in mind. But we have Jupiter, and if you do have a telescope, you can go ahead and zoom in on Jupiter and see its 4 Galilean moons on its left side right now. So we have Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto in their order away from Jupiter. So these are the 4 moons that Galileo first observed when he had his telescope. We now know Jupiter has over 60 moons, but those are the first 4 that Galileo saw. We also have Saturn just a little bit lower. Let's take a closer look at Saturn. So we can see the beautiful rings. You wouldn't necessarily see all of these moons in a telescope, but you would be able to see the rings. And if you have a decent telescope, you might even see this gap in the rings, which is called the Cassini Gap. When Galileo looked at Saturn, it didn't have enough resolution, so he just saw blobs on each side, and he called it a planet with ears. Cassini came along a little while later with a better telescope, and he actually observed the rings and the gap in this rings. So it's named after him. And then finally, we have the planet Mars. Hey, Mars. We'll hopefully see some humans land on Mars in our lifetime, the red planet. So you can check that out. Again, you won't see this much detail, but you might be able to see things like its polar ice caps if you have a telescope. But those are some things you can go outside and see in the sky right now when it's clear out, and I encourage you to do that. Go check outside, because one thing to keep in mind, especially during all of this when we can't go see each other and be near our friends and family, is that we all share the same sky. We can all look up and see the same stars. So that's something that can connect us. We can go outside and know that others are looking at the same stars and hopefully feel a little more connected that way. All right, thank you very much, and you guys have a great night.